Hello, I'm the Geordie Saver and I'm going to be doing my mortgage overpayment update for November 2024. So we're approaching the end of the year and I am getting closer and closer to having our mortgage balance be below £100,000. So at the end of last month, we had a mortgage balance of just under £102,500. And we'd managed to overpay a bit more than normal last month, or at least a bit more than the past couple of months. So the balance that we paid off in October was £722. So I'll jump right in and go through the figures. Now, I must confess that this month I had a bit of a nightmare with recording the figures. I mean, that's probably a bit of a exaggeration, but my mortgage company, I have an app which shows me my mortgage balance and the interest that's been accrued on it in the year and so on, and it gets updated daily, and you have to log in and I have to record the numbers the last day of the month, because once for example, this month I forgot to do it on the last day of November, so I had to log in and take the numbers on the 1st of December, but the 1st of December's interest, so the daily interest, had accrued on the mortgage and been added to that screen. So the interest figures are probably a couple of pound out, but I thought, you know what, I won't try and fix it, because I've tried fixing things in the last time and it doesn't work well. So I'm just going to leave it as it is, and you might wonder why the interest looks a bit high than maybe you're expecting, but I'll go through the figures and stop waffling. So the start balance was the £102,467. My standard payment, which is at an interest rate of 1.16%, is £510. And then we made an overpayment of £134. So that is made up of £100, a standard overpayment that's just sort of added into my contracted monthly payment. So I'm contracted to pay, I should say me and my partner are, to pay £510 a month, and I just contacted my mortgage company, I think it was a few months ago now, and said, can I change that to £610 instead? Or might be £609 I changed it to. So then they just take £609 out. So there's £100 overpayment, which is, representing our mortgage interest. So the idea was that we'll always overpay by the amount of interest that the mortgage accrues. So that comes out, and then there was a £25 overpayment through the Sprive mortgage overpayment app. And then the interest that accrued on the mortgage was £100, but that might be £1 or £2 out. And then the end balance was £101,925. So yeah, we're getting closer and closer to the £100,000 mark. We've broken another £1,000 do I call it barrier, threshold, I should say. So really happy with that. And then the balance paid off in the month was £543. So yeah, what I want to sort of reflect on, I guess, is that I really want to get this below £100,000, and it's made us think about what to do with my December pay. So, since these figures, I've had the 2nd of December, I think, was when I paid my mortgage payment. So there'll be another £600, or I should say £500 coming out of this. So the balance at the end of December, if I don't make any additional overpayments, should be about £101,300. So my mind was sort of ticking, and I was thinking, in December, so I get paid at the end of December, should I pay £1,000 additionally off the mortgage? That would get us to 100,300 in something pound, and then the standard payment in January would then get us below £100,000. So by the 3rd or 4th of January, would have a mortgage balance of under £100,000. But then I'm like, actually, is that me just reverting into a way of behaving with my money that isn't helpful in the long run, because my priority is building up my emergency fund. So if I then direct £1,000 towards the mortgage so that I can be under £100,000, a couple of months earlier, am I just moving stuff away from that should be going towards the emergency fund, and I'll just find myself in a position again, which I always seem to find myself in, where something crops up and it has to come from, something crops up that's not an emergency. That means that I have to take it from an emergency fund. So I'm sort of pausing and thinking about what to do, but at the moment I'm going to have to try and restrain myself and just, just build up my pots of money so I don't have to dip into my emergency fund for non-emergencies. So I'll just go through the total figures for the year so far, if I can move this yellow box. So we've got, the starting balance was just under £111,000. I've made £5,608 in standard payments, around £4,500 in overpayments. The interest that accrued is £1,123. So as you can imagine, an extra £100 of the full year, it'll come to around £1,200 and something pounds in interest, which is a very low interest rate. And I always get messages on here about why I'm overpaying my mortgage at such a low interest rate, and it is a personal preference. There's a lot of emotions into that behavior, but the rational side of me, the reason I'm doing it is because once I overpay my mortgage, it's locked away. And it's very hard to take that money out, which can be a negative thing if I don't have a big enough emergency fund. But it's also a positive thing for me, because I know that there's no chance that we are going to dip into that money, So it's whereas if I had that money in a bank account, even if it was paying, say, 3% interest, which would beat my mortgage interest rate, there's a big chance that I'd dip into that money for a holiday or other things. And other people would say, oh, well, restrain yourself. And it's like, well, actually, it's quite hard to do that if you know how you behave in certain circumstances. So that's one reason. The other reason is that this interest rate isn't guaranteed to last forever, and I don't think it will. I'm due to remortgage in 2026, and at which point I expect to probably be remortgaging to a 4% interest rate, maybe less if I'm lucky. So all the overpayments I've made, the saving on those will be 4%, if you see what I mean, because when I show my current total overpayment so far, there's over £25,000 of overpayments, and if I hadn't overpaid, then that £25,000 would be accruing a 4% interest rate in 2026. So the end balance is £101,925. So I keep saying but I mean we paid off £9,065 so far this year. So the percentage of the balance from January that were paid off so far in 2024 is 8%. The total overpayment so far is £26,219, and the current mortgage end date is January 2044. Now, I've mentioned this before, I opted to have, and this again, it's a personal preference, it's not advice, but I opted to have our mortgage overpayments reduce the mortgage term. So for the past few years, what I've had is I've just had it not reduce the mortgage term. So when I overpay, it just sort of takes the balance off the mortgage, and then when we come to remortgage, it would mean that the term would be the same, so the amount that we would pay each month would reduce. So for example, I think my original monthly payment was £662, and then it went to £589, and then because of the overpayments and because of the low interest rate, it then in my last remortgaging went to £509. But I decided that I wanted to see the mortgage term come down, because I'm quite comfortable with having a £500 mortgage payment. I'd rather see that gain come off the term rather than the amount. So I made that decision, and I should say we made it, because I put it to my partner and they were like, oh yeah, whatever you think. So they're quite laid back on that and they trust my decision making. So we did that earlier on this year, and in the first few months of the year when we were paying over £500 in overpayments a month, you could see that come off. So you would see the term reduce. So originally this was my original mortgage end date was March 2047, and then over 3 years, all the overpayments I've made so far, they were sort of impacted in the mortgage, and yeah, it went down to 2044. But then ever since, when I started making smaller overpayments, or less than £500, the mortgage end date doesn't change. So I think the trigger point for it to go down is when you overpay more than £500, and then in one go, I should say. And then what will happen is it impacts, like it takes all the overpayments that you've made kind of since the last term date change, and then it impacts them. I think that's my theory anyways. So one of the things about overpaying more than £500 in December would have been that I would be able to see the fruits of my labour, and I'd see that mortgage end date come down. And the other thing I'm thinking about, and I might as well talk about it now because I've had a right waffle on this video, is what to do when our mortgage is up for remortgaging. So in 2026, there's some thought that should we instead of making all these mortgage overpayments, should we just wrap them into our standard payment, and should we say opt to reduce our term at the next remortgage point? So I've done the calculations, and I'll probably do a video on this when I'm closer to remortgaging. But for example, we are contracted to pay £509 a month. If we say in the end of 2026, when we're up to remortgage, could we change the term so that there's only 10 years left on the mortgage? And I think a 10-year, so if we have £90,000 left at the end of 2026 and we remortgage so it's a 10-year left on it, then it would be £915 a month over a 5-year fix. From memory, that's what it was looking like. I think the interest rate was just over 4%. So I was thinking, do we want to lock that in? And then it sort of frees up that headspace to just know that once I'm in my mid-40s, we'll definitely be mortgage-free, and then anything additional we can do to be mortgage-free before then would be great. But then I've got in the back of my mind, like, if we lost our jobs, having we would really, so say we're £500 now, £915 would be an additional £400. So if we lost our jobs, actually not having that additional £400 would make a lot of difference to our peace of mind in terms of being able to pay the bills. So there's just a lot to think about. And then on the other side of things, I'm thinking, do I just want to, at the moment, all our sort of wealth is heavily weighted towards this asset, which is our flat, which isn't liquid. We can't get the money out. So even though we've been trying to build up my investments in savings and premium bonds, should we just focus on that and our goal maybe be in mortgage neutral position, where we still have a mortgage, but actually the savings, investments and premium bonds balance is bigger than the mortgage. So we know on paper we could pay it off if we wanted to, but actually we target something which is more liquid and over the long term could see interest gains. So I'm going to pause there because I could probably talk all morning and just waffling and getting this all off my chest. So if you've got to the end of the video, thank you very much for bearing with us. If you've got any thoughts on anything I've said, please put them in the comments down below and let me know how your journey's going, and I'll see you on the next video.